I still need a couple more bulletin readings.
Good morning, everybody. Can everybody hear me okay? Ish? All right. I'll make sure to project, put my children's pastor voice back on. So welcome to week 4 of our What Does It Mean to Be Presbyterian class. Shout out to those of you who've stuck with us all 4 weeks. If you've missed any weeks, you can find those on our YouTube channel. Yes.
Is there a test?
There is not a test. Nope. So today I'm going to talk a little bit about the PCUSA as a denomination and what the PCUSA kind of mission and ministry looks like today. We've done a lot of history over the last few weeks, so thanks for bearing with me on that. But I think a lot of that kind of leads us up to where we are today. So the first thing that I want to talk about is a program. It's not necessarily a program, it's more of they call it an initiative. It's called the Matthew 25 Initiative. It's a denomination-wide kind of thing. It's supported by the national staff. And Matthew 25 is the portion of scripture where Jesus talks about the sheep and the goats. The sheep are the people who have helped others in their distress, who have fed the hungry, who have visited the sick and the prisoners, etc., etc. Do we know which passage I'm talking about? Mostly, kind of. Okay, go look up Matthew 25 when we get home. I'm not going to read it because it's a little long and I want to make sure we get through all of this stuff. But there are 3 kind of prongs to this Matthew 25 initiative. And they invite congregations, presbyteries, national organizations to come alongside them in first building congregational vitality. That sounds like a lot of buzzwords, right? But part of this initiative is changing the definition of a successful church. It's not so much about numbers, how many people are in the pews, how much money we're bringing in, and it's more about the life of the church. So I want to give you, this is from the PCUSA website. I printed it out. And these are the 7 marks that they have for a vital congregation, a congregation with vitality. 1, a commitment to forming disciples over every member's lifetime. This leads first to personal transformation as people put on the heart of Christ, and then to social transformation as people joyfully go forth into the community and tackle the issues facing today's culture. 2, embracing the call to evangelism. We show forth the love of Christ by our actions and our lives even more than by our words. Our relationships are genuine and caring. People know we are Christians by our love. 3, an outward focus. Our church is not a place to escape from the world, but rather our gateway into our community, where we may be the hands, feet, heart, and mouth of Jesus Christ for people who are suffering or marginalized. 4, empowering every member to discover their individual calling and the gifts God has given them so they can go forth and serve. Sound familiar? 5, spirit-inspired worship that challenges, teaches, transforms, convicts, and energizes us. So when we are sent out, we've experienced the wonder of God and are changed for the better from when we arrived. 6, caring relationships modeled on God's love. We open our doors and hearts to all people, and we build relationship modeled on God's love, which leads to genuine reconciliation and peace. 7, congregations with healthy systems. Our mission focuses are clear. There is fiscal responsibility and accountability. We have thoughtful decision-making structures. Our leaders and staff enjoy a sustainable balance of work and rest time. Those are the 7 marks of vitality. You'll notice that none of those were churches that are bringing in a certain amount of money. None of them are about churches that have a certain number of members. These are things that we can and are working on right here, right now, with exactly the people we have, And the hope is that folks are generally more attracted to a congregation with some life in it. Does that make sense? So the PCUSA has resources, has staff people working on this, has programs, etc., that go along with that. So that is one of our denominational values, let's say. The second thing in this Matthew 25 initiative is ending structural racism. So thinking of racism not necessarily as a person being mean to another person, but the ways that structures have systematically disenfranchised people of color. So for example, one of the greatest examples that I can think of is redlining. How many of us know what redlining is? Oh, good number. All right. So for those who don't, redlining was a practice in the first half to 2/3 of the 20th century, where banks would literally draw red lines on maps, and you would not be able to get a mortgage to buy houses in those neighborhoods. Guess which neighborhoods those were? They were black and brown neighborhoods. They were black neighborhoods, Hispanic neighborhoods. This happened as close as Grand Rapids. I don't know about Jenison in particular, but redlining was a huge force in why Grand Rapids looks the way it does even today. So that's another of our kind of denominational values. And again, they have programs, they have congregational studies, they have national staff folks working on this. The third is eradicating systemic poverty. So rather, again, than focusing on individuals, the denomination really hopes that we can focus on the structural barriers that either lead to poverty or that prevent folks from getting out of poverty. So, for example, the minimum wage and how all of that plays into this kind of cycle of poverty. So, thinking big picture rather than kind of one-on-one ministry. So that's the Matthew 25 initiative. These are the three things that the denomination is kind of putting some resources behind right now. And to be a Matthew 25 congregation, presbytery, whatever, you really only need to make a commitment to one of those. So we could be a Matthew 25 congregation. We're not at this point because that's something we haven't really had the time to talk about. And this is relatively new in the last few years. But that's one of the kind of focuses that we have as a denomination right now. Questions about that? Lee?
Did you make copies for us of that at all?
I didn't, but I can.
It would be helpful for us to recall.
Yeah. I can also put a link to the webpage in the Parkwood Press. That'll be easier, I think, than trying to keep track of copies. So look for that in the press this week. And I will say, the PCUSA does have a decent website. It's a little hard to find things, but we do have a website. So I'll include a general link to that too, so you can get more information than what I am able to cover in 30 minutes over 4 weeks. The second thing I want to talk about is, so the denomination right now does its work through 6 distinct agencies. We have 6 agencies doing the work of the church. The main one for mission and ministry is called the Presbyterian Mission Agency. That oversees all of our curriculum, our theological resources, worship resources, advocacy and social justice programs, education. So PMA runs schools and camps, holds conferences, and the Presbyterian Disaster Assistance is also under the Presbyterian Mission Agency. So we'll talk about that a little bit later. But one of the things that's also under PMA is all of our mission co-workers across the globe. These are what were traditionally called missionaries. We call them mission co-workers because they specifically work alongside people and organizations in their host countries to do the work that they've been called to do. So we have mission co-workers on every continent except Antarctica. And for all I know, there are Presbyterians on Antarctica too, but there are no mission co-workers on Antarctica. So, and all of these partner with local ministries for the good of their communities. So I want to give you a few examples of our mission co-workers. One is the Reverend Nadia Ayub. She works in Greece as a translator and interpreter for the Evangelical Church of Greece, which provides housing and support for refugees coming from the Middle East. So refugees coming from the Middle East to Greece, she specifically works as an Arabic to Greek interpreter and translator, helping refugee families with things like doctor visits, legal appointments, and other general services. The Reverend Kurt Esslinger works with the National Council of Churches in Korea as their reconciliation and unification coordinator. He maintains a relationship with a partner staff person in North Korea's Korean Christian Federation, working together between the two countries to promote peace and reconciliation between the two nations. His wife, Hae-young Lee, works with the young adult volunteers. You may have heard that when we talked about the Pentecost offering. That's a 2-year Peace Corps-like program where college-age and young adult folks can go and live and volunteer in any number of countries, doing all kinds of work with Presbyterian missionaries and organizations. So she helps coordinate them, make sure they have safe housing. She's kind of the in-country coordinator for Korea's Young Adult Volunteer Program. Third, the Reverend Dr. Carla Cole works in Costa Rica, teaching at Latin American Biblical University, where she guides and trains future church leaders from throughout Latin America. So she, has a PhD in her fields. She is teaching these Latin American leaders who come from all over the Spanish-speaking parts of Latin America and South America, and then they are sent back out into their own communities to teach, to pastor, to do the work. And so she is multiplying leaders in her work. And that's just 3 of the hundreds of mission co-workers that we have around the world. They have very specific jobs. They're not just like sitting on street corners telling people about Jesus, which is fine. But they are doing work that is needed by their host countries, while also exhibiting this life of Christ. Questions about mission co-workers, mission work in general? Dave?
It's been a while. Do some Presbyterian churches have direct contact or financial support for mission co-workers? That used to be a line item in some budgets.
Yes. So some churches do support specific missionaries, mission co-workers, sorry. And so, they get their newsletters and maintain that relationship. And then I think every 5 to 10 years, the mission co-workers will do like a home tour, they call it, where they will come and visit those specific churches who have supported them and say, look, I'm here. Look at all this great work that we've done together. So yes, that is very much still a thing. So I want to talk for a minute about Presbyterian Disaster Assistance, also known as PDA, because we don't have enough acronyms in our lives. So Presbyterian Disaster Assistance is far and away one of the best Christian disaster response agencies out there. They work alongside other agencies like the Red Cross, etc. But PDA specifically shows up early and stays late. So with a hurricane, for example, PDA will show up in 1 or 2 days after a natural disaster, and they will stay there for up to 2 or 3 years in that community, helping folks rebuild, making sure the community is stable, hosting work groups from Presbyterian churches who will come down and work on houses and all of that fun stuff. And so they are well known in the world of disaster assistance for being in it for the long haul. And they also provide a lot of spiritual support to the leaders in that community. So PDA staff in particular are usually pastors who come to pastor the pastors in that community so that they can do their work well. I also want to say that PDA also responds to crisis situations that are not natural disasters. They are man-made disasters, things like mass shootings. PDA will respond to building disasters. I have at least one friend who the roof on their sanctuary just caved one day. No warning, the whole roof just fell in. And within 24 hours, PDA had called her, the pastor, to say, what do you need? How can we help you? So they're not just responsive, they are proactive in making sure that churches, organizations have the support they need to minister well. And like I said, they are very big on providing not just material support, but that long-term spiritual support. So PDA, I think we do have like a special offering line item for them, but part of our Pentecost offering, one of those special offerings, also goes to, it's Peace and Global Witness. Yes. Yeah, one of the special offerings. It's Peace and Global Witness. The one that we just did, Peace and Global Witness, part of that goes to PDA to support their mission and ministries. So the great thing about the PCUSA is because we are such a historic denomination, we have deep roots, and because we are a large denomination, like I said a couple weeks ago, we are the largest Reformed denomination in the country, we have a lot of resources. So any issue that you can imagine, there is a theological statement about it from the General Assembly. There is a committee formed about it. There are probably staff people working on it. If you are passionate about it, you can find the PCUSA person working on it. So that's a big comfort to me, at least. We are not alone. Dave?
I don't know the exact percentage, I don't know if you do, but I know sometimes people say, well, I give to this helping agency, and 20 or 25% of my gift goes for overhead administration. I think PDA is really, really minuscule, whether it's 4%, 3%, 2%, I don't know, but it's very, very low.
Absolutely, yes. And so PDA is, PDA is a great organization, partially because it's funded by the denomination. So most of the overhead comes from denominational support rather than from individual gifts. And so all of those individual gifts can then go back into communities that have been affected by disasters. Yeah. Dennis.
Are you willing to talk about Presbyterian Church's mission in medical field? Like, you are at Presbyterian Hospital, Los Angeles Presbyterian Hospital. I don't know if you were able to give a little background about that also.
Yeah, unfortunately, I don't know a whole lot off the top of my head about that. I do know that the Presbyterian Church in various places, the PCUSA, has been working for the good of its community since the beginning. We are not a closed off kind of church. We are not here to escape from the world, like this said. We are here to do good in our communities. And so things like hospitals, schools, universities, the Presbyterian Church has been founding those since the 1600s. So I don't know specifics, but I can say that it does not surprise me at all. Yeah. Any other thoughts, questions?
Our grandson was born in New York City Press.
Ah, very nice.
I've been in the building. They did a good job.
Yep.
I do have a question though.
Yeah.
Hopefully it's easy to answer. All the Presbyterian-backed colleges, do they support, through the policies that you talked about, the social justice ideas and especially economic need? I mean, I know colleges, they do support tuitions for people who can't afford to go, but is that a fundamental thing that's carried out, do you know, within Presbyterian-backed colleges? To me, that seems to be really important, and part of that because Grand Valley has so many first-gen students and so many students who work tremendous hours outside of their studies in order to be able to stay in college.
Right, yeah, absolutely. And again, I can't really speak to specific colleges or universities, but I can say that is very much a value for those Presbyterian universities. And for especially another one of the special offerings, I'm pretty sure it's Pentecost. Part of that offering goes to scholarship funds, not necessarily just for those Presbyterian colleges and universities, but for Presbyterian students all over the country. And I know every year I get mailings from 2 or 3 Presbyterian colleges that say, if you have kids who are going to college, we have full ride scholarships available. You know, send us their application, basically. And a lot of the colleges and universities, I don't think there's a mandate to follow specific policies from the General Assembly, but I think they're still Presbyterian for a reason.
Right.
Yeah. The other thing I want to note is that whether it's hospitals, colleges, universities, anything else that has the word Presbyterian in it, Presbyterians have a habit of getting involved in a particular issue, saying, this needs to happen. We see a need here. And so they start an organization, they start a hospital, they start a college or university. And then kind of the goal is not that the church sustains that forever, but that it eventually becomes self-sustaining and retains that original mission to fulfill this need. But a lot of times things with Presbyterian in the name are not necessarily run by a Presbyterian church. Does that make sense? So for example, there is, gosh, why can I never remember the name of it? The nursing home, assisted living place in Grand Rapids, Porter Hills, thank you. So Porter Hills was originally started by Westminster Presbyterian Church downtown because they saw a need. They said, oh, we have all of a sudden a lot of specifically retired ministers who have been living in a parsonage their entire life and have no home equity built up and therefore can't buy a place when they retire, and now they have nowhere to go. What are we going to do with all of these people? That was the origin of Porter Hills. Porter Hills is now a completely separate organization. You know, it's doing its own thing, but it was started by a Presbyterian church to fill a need. So that's one super local example. Yeah.
My grandparents went to Porter Hills many years ago when it was small, and they are diehard Episcopalians. So my grandpa had to check out why it was called Porter Hills Presbyterian. And so finally, after much to do, they went there.
Yep. Sounds about right. Yeah.
There's a plaque, when you enter Porter Hills from the original entry, there's a plaque that says, Porter Hills Presbyterian Village, and it names the church board or elders that helped found Porter Hills, right on the plaque. So.
Very nice. Yep. Yeah. So, and that is, like I said, that's kind of a Presbyterian habit and has been for a long time, is to say, we see this, we're going to fill this need, now go, fly. And if there is something you're passionate about, that you really, really enjoy and want to be part of, and you want to connect with other Presbyterians who are doing that same kind of thing, let me know, and I will find out how to get you connected. Because literally anything you can imagine, there is a theological statement and a committee and a staff person somewhere working on it. So,
you know, it might be helpful, I'm thinking, going forward, we're part of the Presbyterian of Lake Michigan, which 68 churches now, 67,
something like that.
Something like that. But having come from the east side over in Holt when I was pastor there, I think it would be interesting to those who are here to learn what kind of specific ministries some of the, or as all of our churches that have in the Presbytery. I think of Advent House, if it's still operational in Westminster and Lansing. Some really fascinating programs that are responding to the need and have done it over years, or they're finding a new need, and just so that, you know, it's part of the family. And it's our family in this presbytery. That would be, I think, interesting maybe to some in this, maybe to everybody here.
Yeah.
And depending on how our congregation responds to the refugee situation. You know, that's an outreach and that's a Presbyterian thing.
Yeah, for sure. All right. I'm not going to keep us much longer, but I am going to give you a homework assignment. I'm not going to grade it because this is the last class. But before you leave, if you don't already have one, I'm going to give you a sheet of paper. And before the Parkwood Press comes out on Thursday and you get these 7 marks of a successful church, what I want you to do is take this piece of paper and draw, doesn't have to be pretty, draw what a successful church looks like to you. What does success mean in a church? What are the markers? What are the bars that we've set? And then compare that against what comes out in the Parkwood Press. Sound good? All right. Before we go, any last questions, thoughts, wonderings? Doesn't have to be related to what we talked about. All right. Ed?
I have a question a little bit off the path, I guess, but I wonder so much, as we've been looking at churches, what led you to the path of Presbyterian compared to the multitude of churches that we have in the cause?
Yeah, absolutely. So, my story is a little bit convoluted, so bear with me. I was baptized, raised, trained, and actually originally ordained in a different denomination. So I was born and raised RCA, Reformed Church in America, which is kind of the denomination in these here parts. And I grew up in a small town. Literally, I was surrounded by the church. There were 4 Reformed churches within a block of my house growing up. First Reformed, if you're standing in my childhood bedroom looking out the window, First Reformed was kitty corner this way. Second Reformed was kitty corner that way. Trinity Reformed, because they got creative the 3rd time, was kitty corner that way. And First Christian Reformed was a block that way. And so the RCA was all I knew growing up, right? And for the record, my parents were married at first, I was baptized at Trinity, and I made my profession of faith at second. So we made the rounds. So I didn't become Presbyterian until after I was ordained. And the reason for that is the RCA, in a lot of ways, despite being the denomination that I was raised in, I have a degree from an RCA seminary, like I did all the things, is what I'm trying to say. The RCA is not super friendly to women in ministry.
Understatement.
Very much so. So I graduated from this RCA seminary. I was ready to go. I had ministry experience, and no one would hire me. So I looked and I looked and I looked for about 6 months after graduation. I was working in the seminary library at the time, and a friend who was Presbyterian, who had also gone to the same seminary, said, hey, so this church that I was an intern at is looking for someone to do like a 2-year contract doing children's ministry and education, because the person they have is retiring after 22 years and they're trying to figure out what they're doing with that position. I think you would be great at that. Can I give them your name? And I said, sure, why not? And that turned out to be Westminster Presbyterian downtown in Grand Rapids. And they hired me like a week later. I kid you not. I met with their senior pastor on Friday. I had an interview on Monday. Tuesday, they called my references, and Wednesday morning, they called to offer me the job, which does not happen in church life. Let me tell you, that is not normal. Anyone who is on the PNC at any point in time can tell you that is not normal. I did almost 2 years at Westminster, and then I started looking again because that job was not going to be permanent, and I knew that. And once again, the RCA would not hire me. And so I got a job at another Presbyterian church in Ohio doing what I'm doing now, which is solo ministry, and said, like, I am thriving here. Why am I fighting to be part of a denomination that is obviously not a great fit in several ways, but also we're not going in the same direction anymore. And so I decided that the PCUSA was going to be my home, and Presbyterians have welcomed me very warmly, so I'm grateful for that. So that's how. The why is for all of the things that we've talked about in these last 4 weeks. The Presbyterians organization, I truly believe in. The theology is a great fit for the most part for what I believe to be true about God and the world. And I found that the PCUSA as a denomination is going in the direction that I want to be going. So that's how I'm here. Yeah.
And we're glad you are.
Thanks. Me too. Yeah, took a very sudden left turn there, but I'm grateful. So, all right. Any other questions before we go? All right. Go in peace. Thanks for being here. And come get a piece of paper.